Late afternoon on Morro do Vintem, a hill above Niteroi, across the bay from Rio de Janeiro. Tall grass leans in the wind. A boy tugs a kite string, watching the paper diamond climb against a hazy August sky. His kite dips. He chases it into the taller weeds near the crest of the hill, pushing through grass up to his chest. Then his foot catches on something soft, and he stops. Two men lie side by side in the grass, both in neat formal suits, both perfectly still, and over each man's eyes a strange, rigid covering, dull gray, shaped by hand. The boy runs. It was August 20th, 1966. Down in the town, the boy's report reached the authorities. Two bodies on the hill. No blood he could see. No sign of a fight. Just two men who seemed to have simply lain down to wait. Who were they? Why the suits, the stillness, those crude coverings over their eyes? Nearly 6 decades later, the cause of their deaths has never been determined. The hill has never given up its answer. The boy ran down that slope with a story no one wanted to believe. And when the first officers heard him out, they set off up Morro do Vintem, expecting a quick climb to whatever the child had seen. But Vintem Hill does not give up its heights easily. The ground pitches upward at brutal angles, tangled with dense grass and loose earth that slides underfoot. Every step forward costs 2 of effort. The men reporting for duty that afternoon were not equipped for mountaineering. Police in dress boots, firefighters hauling gear, all of them clawing up a wall of vegetation under a heavy Rio sun. The hill fought back. So the bodies waited. Whatever had happened on that crest, the two men lay untouched through the fading light and into the dark, guarded only by the grass around them. It was only the following day that a small party of police and firefighters finally stood over them. Nearly 24 hours after a child's discovery, someone at last looked down at what he had found. And what lay there made no sense at all. When the men finally crested that last stretch of grass, breath ragged from the climb, what waited for them was not the aftermath of some violent fall. It was two men lying quietly, side by side, as if they had simply stopped. They lay close together, almost parallel, partly hidden by the long grass that had grown up around them. No sign that either had crawled or dragged himself or fought for a last breath. The scene was oddly still, orderly even. Both wore formal suits, buttoned and neat, the clothes of men dressed for something that mattered. Over the suits, waterproof coats. On a warm August afternoon in Rio, why would two men dress for rain that never came? And then the detail that would make this case impossible to forget. Across each man's eyes sat a mask. Not cloth, not paper, a crude eye mask cut from lead, resting over the face like a shield fitted for the dead. Investigators looked for the obvious. A wound, bruising, torn clothing, broken ground where a struggle might have churned the grass. There was none of it. No blood, no marks of violence, nothing to say a hand had been raised in anger. So here were two well-dressed men, coats for a storm, lead over their eyes, lying together on a hilltop with not a mark on them. If nothing had attacked them, then what exactly had they been waiting for up here? Of everything the officers found on that hilltop, one detail refused to make sense. Not the suits, not the raincoats, the masks. 2 rough rectangles of gray metal, resting over the eyes of dead men. They weren't the polished masks of a theater or a carnival. They were homemade. Cut by hand, folded and shaped from soft lead sheet, the kind of metal any electronics technician could bend across a workbench. Each mask was formed to sit over the eyes and nothing more. No mouth, no breathing holes. Just 2 crude shields, molded to block whatever a man might otherwise be forced to look at. Lead is heavy. It's toxic to handle. It's the metal used to stop radiation, to block light and rays. Why would two ordinary men shape it into blindfolds and wear them out to die on a hill? There was no glare on that quiet hillside, no sun to hide from where they lay. And yet both men had gone to the trouble of building shields against the brightness that, so far as anyone could see, was never there. But the masks weren't the only strange things resting in that grass. Fanned out beside the two bodies, half hidden by the same weeds that covered the men, lay a small collection of ordinary objects. And each one only deepened the riddle. The first was a water bottle, empty. Not spilled, not shattered, simply drained to the last drop and set down. Two men had carried water up that punishing slope, and by the time they lay still, every bit of it was gone. Then, close by, a small packet. Inside it, 2 towels. Not dry, not forgotten in a bag, but wet. Damp cloth, folded on a sun-baked hilltop, hours or days after 2 men had climbed there. Why would anyone bring towels at all? Some investigators wondered whether the water and the wet towels were meant to soothe something. A burning throat, perhaps. A reaction to whatever the men had swallowed. Or maybe they were part of a ritual none of the living understood. An emptied bottle, 2 soaked cloths, and 2 men in formal suits, lying beneath the open sky in homemade masks. Everything up there suggested preparation, care, intention, yet nothing explained what they were preparing for. But of all the things laid out in that grass, one object said more than the towels or the bottle ever could. A small notebook. Its pages didn't record a name or an address, but something far stranger. 2 short lines, written in Portuguese. Terse, almost military. The first read, 1630, be at the specified location. A time and a place, though no place was named. The second line is the one that has haunted this case for nearly 60 years. 1830, ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals. A wait signal. Mask. Read it again, slowly. Ingest capsules. Wait for an effect. Then protect the metals. Then await a signal. And that final word, alone at the end. Mask. Now hold that timing against the scene. The masks over their eyes. The capsules the notebook demanded they swallow. The 2 bodies waiting side by side. Waiting, it seems, for a signal that either never came or came in a form no one survived. What signal? Who gave the order to protect the metals? And why swallow anything at all on a bare hill above the city? The notebook answered nothing. It only made the questions sharper. The men who wrote it were about to be given names. Whatever that notebook was meant to summon, the men who carried it up that hill were not mystics by trade. They were technicians. 2 working men from the interior, with tools, invoices, and reputations to keep. Manuel Pereira da Cruz, Miguel Jose Viana, both from Campos dos Goitacazes, a sugar and commerce town northeast of Rio de Janeiro, several kilometers inland from the coast. Ordinary lives, in an ordinary place. They fixed radios and televisions, the delicate electronic guts of a world just learning to hum with current. Steady hands, precise minds, men who understood wiring, voltage, and the patient logic of a circuit. Nobody who knew them described drifters or dreamers chasing the impossible. They were dependable, employed, the sort of men neighbors trusted with a broken set and expected back by supper. So what pulled 2 careful technicians toward a hilltop? Because beneath the invoices and the soldering irons, something quieter lived in their homes. A private curiosity the town never saw. And it began, as far as anyone could later trace, with a single, ordinary errand. 2 steady men with steady trades, then both of them gone in the space of 3 days. And it began Not with anything strange, but with the most ordinary of errands. On August 17, 1966, Cruz and Viana left Campos dos Goitacazes to buy materials for work. Work materials. That was the reason they gave their families before they walked out the door. Electronics components? Parts for the repairs that filled their days? Nothing about the errand suggested it would be the last time anyone who loved them would see them alive. They didn't stay in Campos. To find what they needed, the two men boarded a bus bound for Niteroi, a city that sits across the bay from Rio de Janeiro, several kilometers to the southwest. An ordinary route. A trip technicians might make without a second thought. The bus rolled into Niteroi at 2:30 in the afternoon. 2:30 exactly. By the reconstruction, police would later piece together. The city was busy, sunlit, alive. And somewhere in that crowd, two men in formal suits stepped down onto the pavement with a plan. Niteroi rose behind them in the light, and above the rooftops loomed a familiar shape, Morro do Vintem, the same steep green hill where 3 days later, a boy chasing a kite would find them lying side by side beneath the grass. But on the afternoon of the 17th, none of that had happened yet. They were simply two visitors with an errand, and a few hours ahead of them. Where they went next, and what they bought, would only deepen the mystery. The bus doors hissed open into a city that wasn't their own, and from that 2:30 arrival, the two men didn't wander far. Their first stop was a shop, where they bought something that would puzzle everyone who came after. 2 waterproof coats. Investigators later confirmed the raincoats found on the bodies had been purchased right there in Niteroi that afternoon. Heavy coats. In August, under a warm Brazilian sky. Why would two men buy rain gear for a cloudless day? From the shop they crossed into a small bar. There a waitress served them, and one of the men bought a single bottle of water. An ordinary purchase, the kind 100 customers make. But she would remember these two. It was Miguel she couldn't shake from memory. When police interviewed her, she described him as very nervous, restless, on edge, a man waiting for something he couldn't say out loud. And again, she said, he checked his watch. A glance at the wrist, then another, as if the afternoon were counting down toward some appointment only he understood. What hour was he so afraid of missing? Then they paid, stood, and walked out into the streets of Niteroi. No one who knew them ever saw them alive again. From that bar, investigators believe, they went straight up the hill, to the exact spot where a boy's kite would find them. The nervous glances at that watch would never be explained by the men themselves. And whatever answer their bodies might have held began slipping away the moment they were carried down off that hill. Because the coroner's office in Rio was drowning. Case after case, stacked up on cold slabs, more arriving than anyone could process. The two technicians from Campos joined a queue, and there they waited. And waited. Days became weeks. Somewhere in that overwhelmed system, two bodies that should have been examined within hours sat untouched. And decomposition, once it begins, answers to no one. It doesn't pause for an overloaded schedule. When the autopsy finally came, the coroner opened bodies that had already turned against him. The internal organs, the very tissue that might have named a poison, had broken down too far. There was nothing reliable left to test. So the one question that could have cracked this case open was never asked of the chemistry. Toxicology, the search for any substance in their blood, was simply not carried out. It was already too late. Think what that delay cost us. No wounds, no struggle, and now no way to know what had passed through them. The bodies had told their story to no one, and the silence would harden into permanence. With no toxicology, the science fell silent, and into that silence walked a darker question. What if the two men didn't die by accident at all? What if someone wanted them gone, Consider what the men carried. 2 electronics technicians, said to have left home to buy work materials, arriving in a strange city with cash in their pockets. Some investigators wondered whether that money made them a target. But here the theory stumbles. There were no wounds on either body. No bruises, no defensive marks, nothing torn or broken. If someone attacked them on that hill, they left no trace of the struggle. So the suspicion narrowed to poison. A substance slipped into that bottle of water, working quietly, leaving the body unmarked. It's the kind of death that hides itself, and it demands one thing to prove it. And that one thing was gone. By the time the autopsy came, the organs that might have named the poison had decayed past testing. So murder stays possible and unprovable, forever balanced on evidence that no longer exists. But maybe no one poisoned these men at all. Maybe they poisoned themselves. Willingly, deliberately, following a plan they trusted with their lives. That is the strange door a friend of theirs pushed open when the police came knocking. According to this friend, crews in Vienna weren't just electronics technicians tinkering with radios. They belonged, he said, to a group of what he called scientific spiritualists, men who believed the boundary between our world and another could be crossed, if you knew the method. The method, the theory goes, ran through chemistry. They believed certain capsules, psychedelic substances, could open the mind wide enough to make contact. Contact with spirits, some said. With extraterrestrials, others insisted. And the two ideas, in their circle, blurred together. And here is where the masks stop being madness and start being logic. Because if you expect a presence to arrive, a spirit, a craft, a signal, how do you expect it to announce itself? With light. Blinding, overwhelming light. So you shield your eyes, not with cloth, which the light might pierce, but with metal, solid, cut, shaped to your face. According to this account, that is exactly why 2 grown men climbed a hill wearing crude lead over their eyes. It answers the notebook too. Ingest the capsules. After the effect, protect the metals. Await the signal. Read through the friend's lens. Those cryptic lines aren't gibberish. They're a ritual checklist, a sequence for meeting something not of this world. And in that version, the ending is almost gentle. No attacker, no struggle. 2 believers lay side by side, took what they thought would carry them across, and instead took too much. A simultaneous overdose, waiting for a light that never came. If the friend was right about that strange fellowship, then the proof shouldn't have died on the hill. It should have been sitting in their homes back in Campos dos Goitacazes, waiting for someone to look. And when investigators searched those homes, the ordinary rooms of 2 working technicians, they didn't find tools for radios and televisions. They found something stranger. Scraps and shavings of soft gray metal. The very stuff those crude masks were cut from. Beside the metal, books. Not manuals on circuits and wiring, but literature on spirits, on the unseen world, on reaching beyond the living. Why would 2 electronics men keep a shelf like that? Suddenly the notebook on the hill stopped reading like nonsense. Ingest capsules. After the effect, protect metals. Await the signal. Those weren't the ramblings of frightened men. They were a plan, written in the language of that shelf of books. The masks to shield the eyes. The capsules to open the door. The metals to protect. Every line of that instruction, some researchers argue, matched what was hidden in their homes. 2 ordinary men, 1 extraordinary belief. If the men truly believed a blinding light would answer their call, then the question that has haunted this case for decades is simple. What exactly were they waiting for on that hill? For many, the answer came from above. The masks, the wait for a signal, the remote hilltop, All of it fed a theory that the men were expecting contact with something not of this world, and the case slipped into UFO lore. Books in Spanish and Portuguese folded the deaths into the mythology of the unexplained, alongside sightings and abductions. To some researchers, the lead masks weren't shields against spirits at all, but protection from the radiance of a landing craft. But strip away the stars, and a quieter explanation remains. Two men swallow capsules they trust. The dose is wrong, or the substance is stronger than they know. They lie down side by side and simply never rise. Accidental overdose. Deliberate poisoning. A ritual gone wrong. Visitors from another world. Nearly 60 years on, every theory still hangs on the same broken thread, because the one test that might have settled it was never done. For all the theories that carried this case around the world, none of them ever closed it. Not the poisoning. Not the seance gone wrong. Not the lights in the sky. Nearly 6 decades on, one line still stands on the official record. Cause of death, undetermined. Think of everything that survived. 2 men in formal suits. Waterproof coats bought that afternoon. An empty bottle, 2 damp towels, a notebook counting down to a moment none of us will ever witness. And over their eyes, the lead. That is the image the world can't put down. 2 homemade masks, cut and shaped by hand, worn by grown men lying calm in the grass. Whatever they were waiting for, they dressed for it. And it never came, or it came and left no mark. Could a proper autopsy have answered it? Almost certainly. But the organs were gone before anyone tested them, and that door closed for good. Everything after is theory built on absence, an answer that decayed in a drawer while the country waited. So the Hill keeps it. 2 technicians climbed Morro do Vintem in 1966 and lay down side by side, and no one has ever proven how they died or what they believed was coming. So what do you think happened up on that hill? Tell me in the comments, along with the case you want next, and subscribe to stay with the Unsolved.